The day has finally come, Notre Dame fans. The Fighting Irish opened fall camp on Saturday, August 7th. Blueandgold.com was on site to bring you guys full coverage of today's practice. Who stood out? What were the personnel groupings? Who maybe didn't we see as much of? We will cover that all in today's video. Before we dive into it, please hit the thumbs up on this video to help support what we're doing here at blueandgold.com. Please subscribe to our channel for more fall camp coverage and everything Notre Dame football. And let's bring in our on-site reporters, Tyler Horka and Todd Burlage from blueandgold.com. Now, Todd, this was your first time getting to cover a Notre Dame football practice since March 5th of 2020. Just what was the feeling like in the Irish Athletic Center? What was it like to be back covering a Notre Dame practice in person?
Well, first of all, it was nice to see all my comrades that I haven't seen in a very long time. A lot of excitement, a lot of fun. The guys were excited, obviously. But like you said, Michael, just to be able to get back to a practice for the first time now and going on a year and a half, it was terrific.
Tyler, this was your first time covering Notre Dame football practice. Of course, we just hired you this summer for blueandgold.com. We'll touch on the quarterbacks, but Tyler, definitely wanted to discuss the offensive line since I know today was more of seeing the offense visibly. You guys couldn't see a ton of what the defense was doing. So I would imagine the first day was a lot of mixing and matching of different units. There's no surefire first team or second team, but what stood out to you in terms of personnel groupings?
Well, I think the first thing that I noticed was Jarrett Patterson back at center. There was some talk in the spring session that Brian Kelly really wanted Zeke Correll to play center, but he looked to be a mainstay at left guard. Patterson was working at center most of the day, and if you want me to rattle off the first-team offensive line there, it was actually Tosh Baker was the first guy that I saw at left tackle, not Blake Fisher. I know there were talks in spring that freshman Blake Fisher was going to jump in and play left tackle right away. Again, this is the first day of fall camp, so that can all change. But across the line, it was Baker, Correll, Patterson, and then Kane Madden was actually not playing right guard. That was Josh Dirksen. That was another interesting thing as well. And then at right tackle, it was Josh Lugg. Again, a lot of mixing and matching, but if you wanted to see what it looked like right when we walked in and I looked at that offensive line, that's what I saw.
Yeah, Spindler and Fisher certainly did get their cracks with the first team. Like Ty said, a lot of mixing and matching, Mike. I thought it was interesting that Kane Madden worked very little with the ones.
Yeah, no, that certainly is interesting. You know, maybe that's something that kind of comes along as fall goes on. But if you would have told me this morning before camp, I would have said Zeke at center and Patterson at guard. That makes sense. But hey, you know, a lot of people thought Zeke is definitely a center, but will be interesting. Now, Todd, let's talk about the quarterbacks. Was Coan getting most of the first team reps? Was it more Pine? What'd you guys see?
Yeah, Coan was definitely the clear in front number one today. You could judge by the calisthenic lines kind of the hierarchy of the position groups, and Coan was clearly number one, and then Pine was behind him, and then it went to Brendan Clark, and then Tyler Buckner was down the list a little bit there. Certainly when you just look at the four of them together, Coan jumps out at you as the most physically ready player of all of them by far. That he really stuck out at me in that respect, and clearly the coaches like what they're getting there too.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed that Jack Coan was kind of the ringleader of that group. Mm-hmm. You could tell that everyone was kind of gravitated toward him and bouncing energy off of him and whatnot. And I do think it was interesting to see Tyler Buckner, a guy that a lot of people think can play right away as a true freshman, all the way down the list behind a guy like Brendan Clark, who's had his battles here at Notre Dame. But it definitely appears to be a battle between Coan, a clear front runner, and Drew Pine, who kind of took a few of those first team reps as well, but really it was only those guys doing that.
Yeah, and I wanted to back up a little bit. I just thought it was really interesting. I didn't see Jarrett Patterson move anywhere. He was center, first team center the whole practice that we were allowed to watch. So certainly that looks like that's going to hold up throughout camp.
I think it's always interesting that before they start running, with 11 players and they're going down the field like we saw a little bit on those drives. Quarterbacks are taking snaps off to the side with centers, and Jack Coan and Drew Pine were the only ones to rotate in with Jarrett Patterson. So it looks like Jarrett Patterson's going to be your first-team center, and those two guys are working for first-team quarterback reps.
Now, how did the quarterbacks look, Tyler? I mean, what was your impression of seeing them? I mean, we've seen so many clips of both of them, in the off season, throwing routes on there. So I'm curious of your take, Tyler, seeing those guys in person for the first time.
Well, it was definitely more routes on air, so I'm hoping a little deeper into fall camp we get to see some one-on-ones at least. But, I mean, they both throw a really good ball. Like I said, at the end of what we were allowed to see in the indoor facility, both quarterbacks led drives down the field, and, I mean, they didn't miss receivers. They looked comfortable out there. Both of their drives ended with touchdown passes in the left corner of the end zone, and they put it to where the receivers could high point the ball. I mean, they looked good. They looked comfortable. And, Jack Coan and Drew Pine, those are the two guys that are definitely vying for the job. That was my main takeaway, was one of those two guys is going to start in Tallahassee on September 5th. Looks like Jack Coan, but Drew Pine definitely looks like he's comfortable. And if his number was called to do that, he'd step in and do his best.
He really did. He looked comfortable out there. He looked like he belonged more so from, I thought last year, like I said, I haven't seen these guys in forever. But the starting wide receivers, the first team was Braden Lenzy, Avery Davis, and Jenkins Jr. Kevin Austin, I know there's a lot of curiosity about him. He was running with the second team, so that'll be something to watch through camp as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought it was interesting to see Lorenzo Styles running with the twos as well. Yeah. That's a freshman that a lot of people think could step in, especially since these receivers are kind of unproven, the seniors I'm talking about. Lorenzo Styles immediately ran in there with the twos, and he looks to be vying for playing time too.
Yep, for sure.
Was there anyone else that you guys would want to touch on, standouts from practice? I know it was mainly, it was shorts and T-shirts. There's not a crazy amount to take away other than some of these personnel groupings. But we'll go first to you, Todd. Anyone that stood out past the eye test right away?
I thought Kevin Austin did. I think he will find his way certainly into playing time. That goes without saying, and maybe even as a starter. They were throwing to him really early in practice quite a bit. He caught all 8 of his balls, looked comfortable doing it. Looks fully recovered from any injury and surgeries that he's had. So he kind of stood out to me. Of course, he did last time I was here too, during that spring practice. He's a great practice player, Michael.
And I'll say Kyron Williams looked really good. He was on the front of the calisthenic lines, and talk about a guy who has all the confidence in the world. It's Kyron Williams. I saw defensive coaches going up to him, high-fiving him, bumping him on the helmet. Defensive players, just everyone in the room kind of knows who Kyron Williams is, knows what he's supposed to do for Notre Dame this year after what he did as a sophomore last year. He's kind of a guy, I mentioned Jack Coan being an energy guy. Everyone's kind of gravitating toward him. Kyron Williams is the same way. And have two guys, arguably your two most important skill position players on the offensive side of the ball, to be guys like that, I think that's very important.
Michael, one last thing. My apologies for not getting more on the defense, but they moved them all outside, and we were stuck inside, so there really wasn't much we could do. Certainly when we get that full practice, we'll have a lot more for you from the defensive side.
One defensive note that I will add, though, Jordan Botello was out there. He looked like a full participant. He looked as engaged as anybody else. There's been a little bit of chatter that something might be up with Botello, but he looked to be fully engaged with his teammates.
Yeah, we'll certainly have more on him at blueandgold.com when Brian Kelly speaks to the media. As we record this, he is not practice is still going on actually as we record this. Media only got the first half hour, so we'll have more on him at blueandgold.com when Brian Kelly speaks to the media.